In this section, we're going to be building a full stack web application leveraging the power of FastAPI. This full stack web application is going to be a to-do application, just like our RESTful API projects have been. However, we're going to have a full-blown user interface that's complete for users and clients to be able to use our application. We're also going to be implementing the same authorization platforms, which is using bcrypt and hashing in JWT. The only difference is instead of sending the JWT through JSON, we're going to be saving them as a cookie within our front-end web application. Now, overall, this is a pretty big section, but you'll get an amazing web application at the end. This section's code will be slightly different than the other projects that we've built so far in this course. And that's because we're going to be using some different tools. However, it's going to make perfect sense because we will walk through everything step by step. And I'll see you in the next video where we create and start our full stack applications code. I'm excited to start this journey with you, and I'll see you there. All right. Hey, everybody. Now, in this video, we are going to set up our FastAPI project to be able to make it full stack. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is if we go into routers and go into our todos.py file, and we scroll down a little bit, we can see that we don't really have any routers set up. We just go ahead and hit the direct endpoint of an empty path, which means in our URL, there is no path. But if we look at all of our other endpoints, we have an API router set up that will dictate the prefix and the tags of our endpoints. And that's going to be the very first thing that we add here is inside our todos.py, let's go ahead and add a prefix just so we can separate our to-dos a little bit better. So we want to say prefix equals /todos with our tags that is equal to to-dos. Perfect. All right. Now, once we add this, if we go ahead and rerun our tests, we can see that we're going to get some failures now, and that's because we changed our to-dos path. So if we come back in here and we now jump into our tests and we go into our test_todos, we know that each thing is now going to be /todos, right? That's because we just added a prefix for each of our to-dos endpoints. So right here, we can just go ahead and say /todos for each of our tests within our test to-dos. All right, now let's save our application and let's go ahead and rerun our PyTest just to make sure everything passes. All right, and everything passes. So our application is now ready to be able to be ran using some of the technologies and frameworks and libraries that we're going to be using for our full stack application. And I will see you in the next video where we really start diving into that. All right, hey everybody, and in this video we are going to go over Jinja templating. So what really is Jinja and how does it work within FastAPI? Well, Jinja is a fast, expressive, and extensible templating language. It's able to write code similar to Python in the DOM, and the template passes data to render within the final document. So what are Jinja templating tags and scripts? Well, Jinja tags allow developers to be confident while working within backend data using tags that are similar to HTML. So for example, on our front end, there might be a link that references a style sheet. But right here in the href, we can see that it's going to say URL for static, and then it says our path to where our CSS lives. That is Jinja doing its magic to bring in the CSS, which is in a different file within our application. So let's dive into it a little bit more. So imagine we have a list of to-dos that we retrieved from the database. We can pass the entire list of to-dos into the front end and then loop through each to-do with a simple for loop on the front end or the template. So on our FastAPI side, we might say, hey, we're going to return a new context. And this context is going to be called to-dos on the front end. And we're going to be returning a to-do list. Now on the front end, we can use these brackets, bracket 2% signs to do some magic within Jinja. So we can say for to-do in to-dos, and you can see that it's inside the bracket and 2% signs. We can then now do something with that specific to-do. But the trick here is then we need to say end the for loop by doing 2 brackets, 2% signs, end for, and you'll see this in the front end when we start creating the full stack application, but I wanted to give you a little glimpse before we start coding. Now, what else can we do? Well, we can also use Jinja templating language with if-else statements. So we went over the for each statement. We can also use if-else statements. So one thing that may stand out is the double brackets with to-do length. So here we can see that it's going to be 2 brackets, 2% signs for if to-dos. And then we can say display. So that's going to just be normal HTML. We're going to display something. But here we can do 2 brackets that says to-dos length. Now that's how you print the length. Like, so if there's like 5 to-dos, we'll print 5 here in Jinja. And then we have to say else, do something else if you don't have any to-dos, and then end the if statement. So if to-dos exist, so there's more than 0 because it's not empty, we can print that length. Or if there's not any, then we're going to just print like you don't have any to-dos and then end the if-else statement. Now, what we can see here is the 2 brackets, 2% signs is for conditional statements, while just the double brackets is for like a value to do something with that to-do. So get the length or get some kind of data inside it. All right, well, this is what I wanted to show you, kind of just an overview of templates. So it's not like, what the heck is this when we're coding it? And I'll see you in the next video where we continue into the full stack application. All right, so now that we have our application fully set up and ready for our full stack environment, we can go ahead and start working on that. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is inside here, we're going to create a new folder called templates. So we can say new directory, and name this templates. Now, templates is where all of our HTML files are going to live, and HTML files are what we see when we're on the browser to make an application full stack. So let's go ahead and right click on our templates and say new HTML file. We're going to name this home.html. Now, PyCharm already creates a demo template for us, which is perfect. And inside our title, we're going to say to-do app. And inside our body, we're just going to say h1, which is an h1 tag. And now inside here, we're going to say, welcome to this FastAPI course. All right, and if you're using a different IDE that doesn't automatically create this template, you're going to want to do the exact same thing that you see right here. And our home.html file lives within our templates. Now we're going to need to install some different dependencies for our full stack application. The first being AIO files. So let's go ahead and say pip install AIO files. And now the second thing is going to be Jinja 2, and that's what's going to make us be able to use these HTML files. So let's go ahead and just say pip install Jinja 2. Perfect. All right, now let's just go into our main.py file. And here we need to go ahead and import some things. So we can say from fastapi.templating, import Jinja 2 templates. And then we want to import request from FastAPI. Perfect. And now underneath base.metadata.createAll, we're going to say templates equals Jinja 2 templates, and we're going to pass in a directory that's equal to to-do app/templates. And now this directory of to-do app/templates is in fact our directory, which is to-do app, which is our project. Inside our templates is where our HTML files are going to live. Perfect. All right, now let's go ahead and just write a test endpoint, which will allow us to open up this HTML file. And we can do this by saying @app.get with an empty path of a slash, def test, and then return templates.templateResponse home.html. Perfect. All right, now 2 things that we need to do. When we create a response that is going to be an HTML file, we need to accept the request that is coming in. So just like we're doing an endpoint where we, call get request to get an HTML file, for Jinja 2 to work correctly, we need to accept that request and be able to return a type of request. So right here, we can go ahead and say request of type request, which is going to be the same request object as the one that's coming from FastAPI. And now here, we need to say comma, and we need to say we're going to be returning a dictionary where the key is going to be called request, and the value is going to be the request object that we're passing in. Now, this is a requirement. We need to have this key or the template response will not work. And right now, I'm inside our to-do directory. What I want to do is jump back into our FastAPI directory. So I can say cd ... which moves us back to our FastAPI directory. And I can say clear to remove that. And now I want to say unicorn to-do app dot main :app -- reload. And here we can see our application is now running. And when we open up our web page at that URL, we can now see it says, welcome to this FastAPI course. Now we still have all of our API endpoints. So if we go to /docs, we can see everything. But what we can see now is if we go ahead and say /test, we are going to get the HTML file, and that's going to be rendered in our browser. So instead of originally getting just like a value like for our /healthy check, which just says status healthy in JSON format, we are getting an actual HTML file. And this automatically gets rendered when you go to that URL. All right, well, this is the first step in us being able to create our full stack application using FastAPI. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, so in the last video, we created our home.html file where we rendered welcome to this FastAPI course by using a templates.template response. Now in this video, we are going to set up some CSS for our application. So the very first thing that we need to do is create another directory within our to-do app, which is called static. Now static is going to have static information like static CSS and static JavaScript scripts. So what we can say here now is right click our static and say new directory. And inside our static, we're going to have a CSS directory. And we're going to have a new directory called JS for JavaScript. Now inside our CSS directory, we want to say a new file. And this file is going to be called base.css. And inside our home.html, we have this h1 tag. We're just going to overwrite h1 tags to now just print the color red. So now we need to go back to our main.py file, and right under our Jinja 2 templates, we want to say from FastAPI.static files, import static files. And now what we want to do, underneath our templates, let's come down here and say app.mount/static, static files, which we're going to say the directory is equal to to-do app/static with a name of static. And now what this does is now we are creating a static file within our directory. So we're now able to be like, hey, FastAPI, when you render this HTML file, make sure you find the information inside our static directory, which is going to be our static files. But that's not all we need to do. Inside our home.html, our home.html file now knows that, hey, there's some information within this static directory, but what we're missing is the actual file, which is this base.css. So right above our meta inside our head, we can go ahead and type link rel equals a style sheet. So we're saying we're going to be importing a style sheet, which means CSS, where the type is going to be text/CSS with an href that is equal to quotation marks, bracket, bracket, URL_4, parentheses static, with a path that is equal to CSS/base.css. And then we can say parentheses, bracket, bracket, and then close the link tag. Perfect. We have CSS, which changes all of the H1 text color to red. We have our HTML, which imports that file specifically. And we have welcome to this FastAPI course in that H1 tag that the base CSS changes to red. And then we have our main.py, which imports our static files before rendering the page. So now if we go back and run our application, and we open up our browser and refresh the page, we can see that it's now going to be red. Welcome to this FastAPI course is red. So we have set up CSS, and now we can continue with the course. Hey everybody, in the last video, we created our static directory with CSS and JavaScript folders inside. But in this video, we are going to replace these with the downloadable CSS and JavaScript for this course. Now, the reason we are going to be using the downloadable CSS and JavaScript is because there's just a lot of CSS and JavaScript that we're importing into this full stack application. And that's because this course isn't really about CSS and JavaScript, but we're going to go over it and then we're going to learn how we can use that in FastAPI to build a full stack application. So once you download the resources, you should have CSS and JavaScript. Let's go ahead and just copy both of these. And now let's go over to our static and say paste. It's going to ask us if we want to copy in here. We're going to say yes. And then it's going to say, do you want to override? And we're going to say overwrite for all. So now inside here, we should have two directories that have information inside. Our base CSS is going to have some padding and color for a bunch of different areas of our application. And then it's going to have our leftover H1 colors red that we are not using anymore. Our Bootstrap CSS is going to have a ton of CSS, like literally 10,000 lines of CSS. And this is coming from Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap is used in a lot of production applications. It's a free open source CSS and JavaScript framework that just comes with a lot of good stuff out of the box. So we have our Bootstrap CSS, which we're going to be using throughout this course, and we've customized base CSS a little bit. Then we also have this Bootstrap JS, jQuery JS, Popper JS, and these maps attached to them. These are needed for Bootstrap JavaScript to work correctly, and we're going to be using Bootstrap for when we make the screen small. We have like a little hamburger in our navigation bar and things like that. And then we have our base JS. Now our base JS is going to be the JavaScript that I created for our application. And I'll be going over this as we use it, but really what it's doing is it's hitting the endpoints that we created. So it's like add to do JavaScript, where it's going to be adding our endpoints to be able to hit the to-dos application endpoint. We have our edit, which hits our edit. We're passing in our authentication tokens and things like that. So our JavaScript is right here, and we'll be going through that as it is needed throughout the course. However, again, this course is mostly focused on FastAPI, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on CSS and JavaScript to build this full stack application. What I wanted to do was walk through the HTML, how we can render pages, how we can call our endpoints and scale a full stack application using FastAPI. All right, with that, I will see you in the next video where we just keep diving into our full stack application and we build a real life application for everyone to be able to use. All right. Well, with that, once you add this CSS and JavaScript, I will see you in the next video. All right, so the very first page we're going to create is our login page. So if we come over here and we go to templates, we can right click and say new HTML file, and we're going to name this login.html. Now, just like we did here with home, we want to grab this CSS link, go back to login, and paste that inside. We then can change the title to To-Do App. And now another thing that we want to do is right here, we're only importing base.css. But inside our CSS, we now also have a bootstrap.css. So what we want to do is go ahead and just copy this link and say, let's also import bootstrap.css. All right, perfect. Now what we want to do is let's go down to this body. Now, inside this body, we need to write some HTML. What we want to do is say div class equals container, div class equals card, which is inside that container, and then inside that div card, we want to say div class card header, which is login. Now, outside of that div, we want to create another div with a class that's equal to card body, with a form ID that is equal to login form, with a div class that's equal to form group, with a label of username inside, and an input type that's equal to text. Class is equal to form control, name is equal to username, autocomplete is equal to username, and this is all required. We then want to create another div with a class that's equal to form group, with a label of password, and an input that's type equals password, class is equal to form control, name is equal to password, autocomplete equals current password, and they are all required as well. Now, right outside of this, we want to say button with a type that's equal to submit, with a class that is equal to button primary that says login. And now let's jump out of the form and that div, and let's create another div that has a class that's equal to card footer text muted with an anchor tag, which is just an A, with an href that is equal to /auth/register page that says register ? Now we know that there is no register page yet, but we're adding that here just so we can keep it. And when we do have a register page, we can switch to that page from the login page. All right, now let's go back to our projects. Let's open up our routers and go to auth.py. And inside here, we need to do the same thing that we did in the very beginning, which is just go up to FastAPI where we need to import request. We then need to say from FastAPI.templating import JWT templates. Let's scroll all the way to the very end before we have our first endpoint, where right here we can just say templates equals JWT templates with a directory that's equal to to-do-app/templates. And now right before this, we are going to create our own URL path that renders a template. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to make a comment right here that says pages. And then right here above the first just normal function, that's not technically an endpoint, but they all work together, I'm going to say a comment of endpoints. And this is just to separate and be able to see exactly where our pages are. So right here, I'm going to say @router.get/login-page, where the function is going to be def render login page, where we pass in our request of type request. Return templates.template response of our new login.html. Where we return a dictionary of request. All right, let's go back into our terminal and start up our application. Let's open up our browser where we still have welcome to this FastAPI course. But right here, I want to say /auth/login-page. And boom, we can see a login page right here. We can type in a username. So I can say like test user with a password of just anything we really want to add in there. And we can click login. But nothing's happening. And we can see that the password is getting sent up here. Now, one thing that we can do is if we actually go back into our browser, we can see that our password is visible right here and up here. What we can do is go back into our login. Right here in our password where it says label and input, we have type equals text. We actually want this to be type equals password. So now if we go ahead and we close our application and we rerun it, and we go back to our browser and we refresh, the password will be dots and the username will be able to be seen. But if we click login, we can still see the password right here. And all of this is going to be fixed once we implement our JavaScript. But as of right now, we can't log in. Our password's getting sent over plain text and everything looks bad, at least from the security point of view. But from an HTML, CSS, and just look, it looks like a professional login page. And this is exactly what we wanted right now, is to have this login page ready to go. All right, well, I will see you in the next video where we create another HTML file and slowly start building this full stack application. And I'll see you there. All right, hey everybody, in this video, we are going to go ahead and create our register page. Now to do this, we need to go into our templates. And then right here, we have our home and login. Let's go ahead and say new HTML file. And this is going to be register.html. Perfect. And again, just like we did for login, we want to make sure we say to do app. And we want to go ahead and grab both of these links, which is going to allow us to have the Bootstrap and our base CSS. All right. Now, inside our body, we want to say div class container, div class card, div class card header. And now inside the card header div, we want to say register. We then want to say div class card body. And then create a form with an ID that says register form. And then inside the form, we want to say div class equals form row. And then inside this div, let's go ahead and create a div with a class that's form group, column medium 6 with a label of email. And an input of type text. Class equals form control. Name equals email and required. And now we want to make another div under this that says class form group, column medium 6, label username, with an input of type text, class equals form control, name equals username and required. Let's then jump out of two divs and let's create a new div with a class that's equal to form row. And inside this form row, we want to say div class form group, column medium 6. Label first name. With an input type that is text, class equals form control, and name first name and required. And then let's go ahead and create another div of class equals form group column medium 6. With a label last name and an input of type text. Class equals form control, name is last name and required. All right, let's jump out of these two divs. We have to do one more form row. So we can go ahead and say div class form row. Div class form group column medium 6. label row, input type of text, class form control, and name is role required. And then we want to say div class form group column medium 6 label phone number. With an input type of text, class equals form control. Name is phone number. Autocomplete is phone number, and then required. All right, let's jump out of those two divs. Now we want to make sure that the user types in a password and that they verify the password. And we're just going to do that right here on the front end. So we can say div class equals form group label password, input type is password. With a class that's equal to form control, name password, autocomplete is new password and required. And then we can say another form group with a label verify password with an input type of password, class form control, name password 2, autocomplete new password, and required. We can then jump out of this div, add a button that's type submit with class button primary that says sign in. We can then jump out of the form in the div, create one last div with a class that's equal to card footer, text muted, with an anchor tag of href equals /auth/login page. And we can say already have an account ? All right, and then once you do that, let's go into our routers, auth, and right here, let's scroll down again until we can see our first pages. We can go ahead and just copy this, go ahead and paste the exact same thing here for our pages, but this time we want to say go to our register page. We want this to say render register page. And here again, we want this to render our register.html. After that, we can go ahead and run our application. Let me open up the browser. And here, if we go to our login page, we still have our login page. And then if we click register, it's going to bring us to a register page. And if we click this, already have an account, we'll go back to our login. So we can see in our register page, we have our email, username, first name, last name, role, phone number, password, and verify password. And we can switch between the register page and the login page by clicking this button. All right, now if you've noticed, if you type in anything, it doesn't work here. And if we go ahead and just type in a bunch of nonsense here, again, it's not going to work. Well, what we need to do is set up our JavaScript. So we already have some of our JavaScript, and we'll kind of walk through exactly what that looks like for us to be able to input our JavaScript so we can hit our API endpoints so we can correctly register and authenticate a user. But when we do that, I am going to show us kind of a trick we can do with Jinja, and that will allow us to not have to do so many duplications of code within our templates. So I'll see you in the next video where we keep diving into this full stack application, and I'll see you there. All right, so now we have our register and our login page. However, there's two things going on that we probably don't want to keep happening. The first one being is it's not connected to our JavaScript. So if you try to run our register or login, neither works. The second thing is this doc type HTML with all of our headers. And then if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we have like our HTML and our body. We need that every single time because we are reloading the web page every single time. And it could be easy to mess up. So if we had to create another page, and let's say we didn't copy and paste it perfectly, it's easy for us to mess up with a title or with links that we might need within other parts of our application. And Jinja allows a way for us to be able to easily be able to reuse a lot of the same things that we're going to need inside each of our HTML files. And I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. If we go into templates and we say, hey, we want to create a new HTML file called layout.html, here we will say exactly what we need for each area of our project. So for example, I'm going to go to my login and we know we need this header. And I'm going to copy the whole header because it already has the title and both style sheets that we need. And then I can just say, hey, let's wipe that out and replace it here. And really, this is this exact template, this exact thing, and it doesn't even have our JavaScript yet implemented. We need this for every single HTML file that we create moving forward. And eventually we're going to have to add JavaScript, and our JavaScript is going to be needed to add to this file. So what we can do here is we can say, hey, Jinja, we want no matter what to use this template, and we only want what's inside the body to change. Because you can see the only difference right now is inside the body. So what we can do is we can use something called block content. And we do this by saying bracket, 2% signs, block content. And then under block content, we have to say end block. And we're saying exactly where we want the body or the content of a different file to fill in. So now we're essentially saying, hey, we want only, each time we render a new page, we want it to always use this layout and we want to render it inside. However, we need to tell each file that we are about to do that. So all we have to do here is right here where it says our header, we can go ahead and delete everything, actually include that body and delete everything up. And then down here, we can remove that body and HTML tag. So now all that should be left inside of this file is this, this div script. And this div script is going to be the first thing that we do. So it's going to be a container that's going to have our card and all that kind of stuff. So we need that right here. Now, what we need to do now is tell Jinja, say, hey, we need to render something inside here. And before I do that, I'm going to highlight everything because it seems like the spacing might be a little bit off. And you can just do a shift tab twice and move it to the left. All right. Now up here, what we can do is say bracket, 2% signs. And now inside here, we can say include our layout.html. So what we're saying here is, hey, when we render our login page, we want to include our layout.html And then it auto-magically knows that, hey, we need to fill the login page difference inside this block content. So now if we go ahead and render our application, we bring up our web page and we refresh, we can see that it will work as expected. But what we can see here is that we have removed the container that makes it fit a little bit better right here. Looks like I might have accidentally deleted a div container. Here it is. We are back and we are in business. All right, now let's go ahead and do the exact same thing for our register. So if we come back into our register and we went ahead and removed everything above here with our body included and just have our last thing, this div class container. And then we scroll down and remove this HTML and body. I'm going to highlight everything, shift everything over. And now up here inside the register, I'm also going to say include layout.html. And just like our login, this is what we need to include right there. So now if we go back into our application and we refresh, if we go to register, everything is going to continue working as we expected. All right, now the JavaScript still doesn't work and we will implement that here very, very shortly. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, so now in this video, we are going to go ahead and add our JavaScript files. So we go back into our layout.html. Here is where we keep our style sheets and everything in here. And if we look at our static, we have two CSS files, and they're both right here on our layout.html file. If we look at our JavaScript, we have a couple different files, but we really only have 4 JavaScript files. These other 2 are map files, which are required by the JavaScript files to work correctly. But what we need to do is go ahead and add these to our application. And now once we add these, our register and login should work. But I'm going to kind of add these and then I'm going to walk through the JavaScript. So the first thing that we need to say is script source equals bracket bracket URL for static with a path that is equal to /js/jQuery-slim .js, and then we can wrap that up with 2 brackets and quotation marks. And this is going to be very similar to how our CSS looks up here. And if we open up our project, we can see that this jQuery-slim.js is this one right here. Now, what we need to do is we need to paste this 3 more times. And what we're going to do here next is change this to popper.js. Change this one to bootstrap.js. And the last one to base.js. And now one thing, make sure these scripts are right above the last body tag, the end script. And that's because we want it to load later on. And the only difference is here for this base script one, this very last one that we wrote, this base.js, make sure you add defer at the end. This means, hey, no matter what browser, we want to load this script last. And the reason we're loading this script last is because we need to check for IDs on the page. So again, if we open up our base.js, we can see that there's a whole bunch of endpoints going on. We have add to do, which I'm going to close. We have edit to do, and then we have our login and we have our register. And kind of just to show our register, because that's going to be the easiest one to use because login is going to redirect us somewhere else, is right here in our register.js, we have our const register form document.getElementById register form. If register form, so here we're checking, and that's why we need our base JS to be deferred, because we are going to find this ID. And this ID can be found in our forms. So right here, this is super important. ID equals register form. That's what we're looking for in our browser. If it exists, if we find it, all right, well then we want to do some functionality. And the functionality that we're really doing is if the passwords don't match, we just throw an alert. And then if it does match, well then we're just going to create a new payload, which is like the body of a post request. We're then going to use JavaScript to call our /auth, which is our register. And then we have our post inside, which is going to be our method or HTTP verb. We want the header to be of JSON. And then we can stringify our payload. And this is how you do this in JavaScript. It's kind of, it's fairly straightforward. I just wanted to make sure that we kind of saw it. If this is successful, if a request to our FastAPI is successful, we're going to redirect to the login page. If not, we're going to throw some errors. So now that this is added, what we can do is we can go to unicorn to-do app.main:\app --reload, go back into our application, and we can go over to register. Here, I'm going to say codingwithroby@email.com. Username is going to be Coding with Roby. First name is Eric. Last name is Roby. I'm going to say my role is an admin, but we can type whatever we want in here. This is a demo application. Phone number, I'm just going to add all zeros. Password is going to be test1234! And then test1234! twice. I'm doing twice just so we can see that first error of passwords do not match. And if I remove one of the exclamation marks, it should match. And there we could see that the submission actually went through. And if we come down here, we can see that our /auth endpoint, which is our register endpoint, worked and it was created, and then it successfully redirected us to our login page. Now our login page will work, but there is a step that you need to do, or it could technically break your application later down the line because the next page that we're trying to go to doesn't exist. But I'll walk through it with you. What we can do is type in our username and password. So I'm going to say coding with Roby with password test1234! And I'm going to say login. So what it tried to do was go to this to-do page, and that's going to be our future page, and it's getting handled by the JavaScript. So if we go back into our code, we can see that our login page has this login form, and then in our base.js, we can go up to our login form where we do the same thing, where we get a payload. We're fetching all the form information and putting it into a JavaScript object called a form data, which is something that we can pass over to authenticate. We're using our response. So remember, auth/token is our auth.py file where we fetch a token. And we are just going to be sending over all the information. Here, what we're doing is we're saying if we get a successful response of our token, which we're going to be because we've done this 100 times, and if your application is working correctly, it will go through, where we now have our data. The next thing I do is log out. And what log out does is it deletes all cookies currently on your web browser. And that's because we don't want to have duplicate cookies. So what we're saying here is document.cookie equals our token. And this /path means it's going to live on your browser through the entire session of your web application. So we're setting our token right here, and then it's going to try and redirect us to this to-do to-dos/to-do page, which we do not yet have set up. However, if we go ahead and we say inspect, so right click, inspect if you're using Google Chrome, you can open up this dev tools and go to application. And if you go into cookies, you'll see all the cookies currently on your browser. One of them will be access token. And here is our JWT that we got literally from our FastAPI application. And we're saving it as a cookie. And then each time we need to pass that in. So every time we were using some kind of authenticated endpoint, which we are going to be using, we're going to be passing this token in with it. And I know it's kind of like maybe potentially hard to kind of like see how it's all working right now, but we'll keep going through the full stack application. And this is all using the FastAPI stuff that we have built by hand throughout this course. So this is awesome, awesome stuff. Now, what we want to do here, just to make sure that we don't have issues later on, is when you see this access token, go ahead and right click and just delete that access token. That way, we don't have to worry about duplicate access tokens or that access token expiring before we're ready for it to expire and things like that. So go ahead and just right click, delete, and then head back over to auth/login page. All right, with that, I will see you in the next video. Now, the next thing that we are going to add is our todos.html file. And now this file is going to have all of the to-dos for that specific user, where a user can then edit, add to-dos, delete to-dos, complete to-dos. It's going to be like the main part of the application. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and jump into our routers and go into todos.py. And we want to create this page first. So if you remember, we need to go up to our FastAPI and say we want to import request. We then want to import something called redirect response, and that's what we're going to be doing when an authentication fails. So we can say from starlight.responses import with redirect response. Perfect. And then we want to say from fastapi.templating import Jinja2 templates. We then want to create our templates variable by saying templates equals Jinja2 templates with our directory equal to to-do apps/templates. And now down here, we can go ahead and create our endpoints and our pages. So here, I'm just going to say 3 comments and then endpoints. And then right here, I'm going to do the same thing, but say pages. All right. Now, what we want to do is usually when we returned a request, we just return just that request. We can say in our main, if we scroll down, we can see right here that we just return a request of type request. Well, this context can be used inside your web page when this web page is rendered. So through an endpoint, it just takes in the JSON file, but through template rendering, you can pass in values. So what we want to do here is create a page, but what we want to do is when the page is loaded, we want to pass in all of the to-dos that belong to that user. So let's go ahead and just say @router.get, where we're going to be saying go to the /to-do page. Async def render to-do page, where we're going to pass in our request of type request and our DB of our DB dependency. We then want to say try So we're going to be doing a try catch, try user equals await, get current user, and we're going to be grabbing this from the request that comes in. And remember, our request is going to have cookies. So we can say request.cookies.getAccessToken. So that's going to get our JWT. And if it fails, so if user is none, so that doesn't work, then I'm going to say return redirect to login. And we don't have that function implemented yet. We then want to say to-dos equals db.query, where we're passing the object of to-dos. .filter by the to-dos.ownerID, which is equal to the user.getID.all. And if to-dos is valid, so we have a real user and we're fetching all the to-dos, we can then say return templates.templateResponse to our todo.html file. Where we can pass in request of request, to-dos of to-dos, and our user of user. And then accept return redirect to login. All right, perfect. Now, the only thing that we need to do now is add this redirect to login. So right above this pages and right under this base request, I'm going to go ahead and just write some code for this redirect to logins. So I'm going to say def redirect to login with redirect response equals redirect response of URL/auth/login page with a status code of status.http 302 found. With a redirect response .delete cookie key equals access token. So we're going to be deleting that cookie and then return our redirect response. All right, perfect. And just like you would know, the status for this status comes up here. We can either import starlight.statuses or we can come up to FastAPI and just import status right here. Perfect. All right, now let's jump into our templates and let's create todo.html. At the very top, we want to say bracket bracket 2% signs include layout.html. Now inside here, we want to go ahead and say div class container div class card text center div class card header your to-dos div class equals card body H5 tag of class card title, which is going to say list of your to-dos. With a P tag right under the H5 tag with a class that says card text, information regarding stuff that needs to be complete. And here we're going to have a simple table. So we can just say table class equals table hover. Where we have a T head. And inside the T head, we're going to have a TR for table row. And now 3 table headers inside of scope, column, pound, info, and actions. And now we want to create a T body. Now the T body is going to have 2 different things. So we're going to want to loop through all of the to-dos that we are passing back. So we know that we are returning all of the to-dos for that user. And then on top of that, we want to check, hey, is that to-do complete? Because if it's complete, we want to add a strike through it. And we can do that through CSS. So let's go ahead and say bracket 2% signs for to-do in to-dos. And then right under this, let's do another 2 brackets, 2% signs that says if to-do.complete equals false. And now let's go ahead and create a TR tag with a class that's pointer. With a TD table data with bracket loop.index, and then another one that's bracket to-do.title. And then let's go ahead and have a new table data button on click equals window.location.href equals edit-to-do-page / bracket our to-do ID. With a type equals button and class is button info that says edit. Else, we want to pretty much do the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste that. But for our to-do title, we want to say a class that's strike through TD. And in the table row, we want to say not just pointer, but alert success. And then we need to end it by saying bracket 2% signs end if and bracket 2% signs end for. Hop out of our body in our table, create one last anchor tag with an href that says add to do page. with a class button primary, add a new to-do. Let's reopen up our browser. We can refresh. I'm going to log in with Coding with Roby test 1234 exclamation mark. I am going to log in. And here we can see your to-dos, list of all your to-dos with all of our to-dos. Now we don't have any to-dos yet. So what I'm going to do is create a new page. And I'm going to go to our docs. I'm going to sign in as our Coding with Roby user. And now I'm going to say, I want to create a new to-do. I'm going to say, try it out. I'm going to make sure that it is not complete. So I'm going to say false. I'm going to say priority 3. And the first one, the title is just going to be demo title. And the description is going to be not complete. And I'm going to execute it. And we can see that it was saved successfully. I'm also going to do one that is true so we can kind of see everything that's going on, which would be, it would be complete, but we'll edit that in a little bit. Now, if we go back into our application and we refresh, we can see the two different looks. So the first one is going to be demo title when something is not complete. And the second is going to be demo title when something is complete for this user. Now, just like we did before, if we right click and we go to inspect and we go to application and we delete this access token for whatever reason, and now we try to refresh the page, it's going to redirect us to the login page. Now, that functionality of being able to delete cookies, we are going to implement using a logout button. So in the next video, we are going to go ahead and try and implement that for our application. And I will see you there. All right, so in this video, we are going to create our navigation bar that'll sit at the very top of our web page. And it's going to change whether a user is logged in or logged out. And I'll kind of walk through that step by step. So the very first thing we need to do is create a new template. And I'm going to say new HTML file. And I'm going to name this navbar.html. All right, and inside here, we can just delete everything that's auto-populated because we are also going to embed this within all of our layout stuff. Now, to start, let's go ahead and just create a div. And then we want to say nav class equals navbar, navbar-expand-md. Navbar-dark main-color fixed at the top. Then we want to say anchor tag class navbar brand. href, and we're just going to have this href be a $. That'll just make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, and we'll say to do app. We then want to create a button with a class of navbar-toggler. With a type that's equal to button, data toggle equals collapse, and data target is our navbar nav. With aria controls, that is equal to navbar nav, aria expanded equals false, and aria label equals toggle navigation. Inside this button, we want to make a span that has a class that's equal to navbar toggler icon. Let's now jump out of the span and jump out of the button, create a new div with a class that's equal to collapse navbar collapse. With an ID of navbar nav, so this is going to match the data dash target above. Then we want to create an unordered list, so ul class equals navbar nav. And here we're going to be using a little bit of Jinja. So let's go ahead and say bracket bracket 2% signs if user. So this is if the user is logged in. So if we remember in our login, when we authenticate and then we fetch the to-dos, we return that user. So it'll know that this user is valid or not. So then we can say list class navbar item active with an anchor tag with a class that is equal to nav link. With an href that is to-dos / to-do page, and we'll just call this home. Under the list, we're going to say bracket bracket 2% signs end if. Under this unordered list, let's create one more with a class that is equal to navbar nav ml auto. Another 2 brackets and 2% signs if user. And here we want the logout button, so we can say list class navbar item m1. With an anchor tag that is type button class button button outline light with text white. On click is going to call our logout JavaScript function, and we're going to call this logout. And then under the list, we can say 2 brackets, 2% signs, and end if. All right, and then once we add this navbar.html and we write all the code, we can go into our layouts and right above our block content. So we have our layout with our body and our block content, and inside here is where we populate all of these new HTML files. Well, what we want to do is before we populate any new HTML file, we want to populate the navbar.html. So we can do the same thing that we've been doing on all the other pages, where we can say bracket bracket 2% signs include navbar.html. All right, save it. Let's go into our terminal and let's rerun our application. All right, and we can immediately see that there is a nav bar. This is a little off, so let's go back and look at our code. Here's our anchor tag. This needs to be class. So class equals navbar brand within this anchor tag in the very beginning. I'm going to turn off our terminal and rerun the application. Come back up here, refresh, and there we have it. We now have our blue navbar with white text. If we go ahead and sign in, I'm going to sign in with Coding with Roby test 1 2 3 4 exclamation mark. and we log in, we can see how the nav bar was changed to say to do, app, and home. And we now have this log out button. And if we go ahead and right click and we inspect and we look at our application, we can see that our access token is right here within our application cookies. But as soon as we click the log out button, it deletes the cookie and we are redirected back to our auth login page. And if we scroll up and we look at our status, JavaScript base.js, and we go ahead and just look at our log out code, here we can see function logout. We are going to get the list of all the cookies within our browser, and then we're going to loop through each cookie, and we are going to delete it by setting an expiration date of the past. And when you do that, it'll automatically delete the cookie, and then we redirect to the auth login page. And we know that our auth login page and our application, once the cookies are deleted, does not allow us to go to any other page. So it is a secure way of, being able to log out and not allow a user to get back into the application. All right, and with that, I will let you go and I will see you in the next video. All right, now that we have our navigation bar created, what we're going to do here is add the functionality for us to be able to add new to-dos. So let's go ahead and just create the page first. So we can say right click on templates, new HTML file, or we're going to call this add-todo.html. We can go ahead and delete everything inside. And in the very beginning, we are going to go ahead and say bracket, 2% signs, include layout.html, where we are then going to have a div of class container, a div of class card, and then a div class of card header, make a new to-do. We then want to say div class card body, where we have a form ID of to-do form. And remember, that's like super important. Make sure you include the to-do form as an ID. Div class equals form group, label title, input type text class form control, name title required, let's jump out of that div and create a new div with a class that is equal to form group with a label of description, text area class form control, rows equals 3, name equals description and required. Jump out of the text area in the div. Let's go ahead and create another div with a class that is equal to form group, label priority, select class equals form control, name priority. And now let's go ahead and say option, where we pass in 1, and let's duplicate this a few times. So it's going to say option 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's jump out of this select and div, create a button that is type equals submit. Class button primary, add new to do. With an anchor href that is equal to /todos/to-do page. And a class that is equal to button success that says back. All right, and then once you add this, let's go up into our todos.py file. And right under this first render page, let's go right under this and let's create a new page. And this new page is going to be add to do page. So here we can say @router.get/add to do page. With an async def of render to do page where we pass in our request of type request. We can then say try user equals await get current user where we pass in request.cookies.get access token. If user is none, return redirect to login. So if the user is not valid, and then return templates.template response add to do.html. Where we pass in request of value request and user of value user. And at the very end, we'll say accept return redirect to login. So if something breaks during the try. All right, let's go back into our terminal. Let's run our application. Let's open up our web browser. I'm going to refresh, sign in with Coding with Roby, test 1, 2, 3, 4, exclamation mark. Add a new to do. Here we go. I'm going to say new to do. Description is this is our new to do. With a priority of 3, and I'm going to say add new to do. All right, it looks like it went through. Let's go back into our home up here, or we can click back, and boom, we can see our new to do is added to our list of to-dos. All right, awesome stuff. All right, I will see you in the next video where we just keep building this full stack application step by step, and I will see you there. All right, so now we have our home page, navigation, authentication, our to-do page, and we can add to-dos. Now what we want to do is be able to edit to-dos. So let's go ahead and create a new page for that. So let's go into our templates, say right-click, new HTML file, where we will name this edit-to-do.html. Go ahead and delete everything inside. And the very first thing we're going to do is include our layout HTML. So we can say bracket, 2% signs, include layout.html. We then want to say div class container, div class card, div class card header. Let's edit your to-do. Div class card body outside the edit your to-do div. Then let's go ahead and create a form with a form ID of edit to do form. And again, that's super important for our JavaScript. Then inside the form, let's go ahead and say div class form group. With a label of title, and input of type equals text, class equals form control, name equals title, value, and this is important, we're going to be using Jinja from our to-do, so we're going to be fetching a to-do when we load this page, so we can say value equals quotation marks, bracket, bracket, to-do dot title, bracket, bracket, and you'll see this when we go into our to-dos.py and we add a to-do to the response, and we want this form to be required. Outside this div, let's create another div with a class that's equal to form group. A label that's description. With a text area name description, class equals form control. Rows equals 3 required. And here we want the old description value. So we can say bracket, bracket, to do dot description, bracket, bracket. All right, let's jump out of this div and let's create a new div with a class of form group with a label priority. And then let's say select name equals priority with a class that is equal to form control. Now, what we need to do here is we need it to automatically be selected on the priority value of the to-do that we're returning in the response. So let's go ahead and say option. Now, in the option, we're going to say bracket, bracket, 2% signs. If to-do dot priority is equal to 1, then we're going to say selected equals selected. And then 2 bracket signs, 2% signs, end if, and then the value 1. So what we're saying is we want this value to be considered selected if the priority is equal to the value that we're trying to present. So now we can just duplicate this option 4 more times and just change it from 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, let's jump out of the select, jump out of the div. Let's go ahead and create a new div with a class that's equal to form group, form check. With an input type of checkbox, class form check input, name equals complete, and then again let's do 2 brackets, 2% signs. If to do dot complete, well, then we want to say checked. And then we want to say end if at the end. Let's do a label with a class that is equal to form check label complete. Let's jump out of the div. Let's go ahead and create a button of type equals submit, class button button primary, edit your to do. Then let's go ahead and make an anchor tag of href equals /todos /to-do page class button success, and we'll call this back. Now let's go back into our project and let's open up our todos.py. And right under our add to do, let's go ahead and add an edit to do. So we can say @router.get /edit to do page /brackets to do ID. So we're going to be passing in our to do ID so we can fetch the correct to do. Then we can say async def edit to do request of type request. To do ID of type int. With a DB of DB dependency. We can then say try user equals await get current user request.cookies.get access token. If user is none, return redirect to login. To do equals DB query of todos.filter todos.id equals todoid.first. And then return templates.template response of edit to do.html. Where we pass in request of request, to do of to do, and user of user. And then we can say accept return redirect to login. Perfect. Now let's rerun our application. Let's go into our browser. I'm going to sign in as Coding with Roby, test 1, 2, 3, 4, exclamation mark. Here we can see one of our to-dos. I'm going to click on our new to-do and click edit. This will bring us to our edit page where we can say new to-do. And I'm going to say dash edited. And I'm going to change the to-do priority to 4. I'm going to just say parentheses edited so we know it is in fact being edited. And I'm going to say edit to do, and we can see edited new to do. Now, what's cool is we know it gets this green strike through when it's complete. So if I come in here and I say I want to click complete and now edit to do, it will now get a green strike through. So if we create a new to do, we can say, here's our new to do. Test data, priority 5, add new to do, go back to our home. We'll see here's our new to do. And then here inside our edit, we can edit and make it green, or we can just leave it as default. Now, one thing that we probably want to do, we want to make it complete, maybe if it's within like the same day, so we can see like, our scratch off of what we've completed. But eventually we want to delete it. So in the next video, we will go ahead and implement deletion of to-dos. All right, in this video, we are going to add deleting a to-do. So if we go into our edit-to-do.html and we scroll all the way to the bottom where we can see edit your to-do and back, right between the button and anchor tag, we're going to create a new button with an ID of delete button, with a type button, and class is button danger that says delete. If we go ahead and save that button and we rerun our application and we go back into our browser, now I'm already authenticated, so this is okay. I'm going to go to this third to-do that says edited new to-do. And here we can see this delete button. And when I click the delete button, we can see that it is deleted. So if we click this one now and we say edit, delete, that's gone. Here's our new to-do. If we come over here, we can say complete, edit, it's complete, and then delete. And boom, it's gone. So we have a full running application that allows us to be able to do a whole bunch of different type of stuff. All right, well, that's what I wanted to show you in this video, how we can implement delete using our delete functionality. So inside our code, if we close this and we go up into our static and we look at our JavaScript base.js and we search this page for delete, we can see that it looks for the delete button. And when we get this delete button, we find our URL, we find the ID attached to the to-do ID, and then we will authenticate using our cookies access token, and then we'll call the endpoint within our FastAPI that deletes that to-do. And then we redirect the user back to the home page. All right, cool stuff. Well, this is everything I wanted to show you, and I will see you in the next video. All right, so now one of the very last things we want to do is when we just go to our normal URL of 127.0.01 port 8000, we have this welcome to this FastAPI course. Now, what we probably want to happen is for if a user goes to this, we'll either A, direct them to our to-dos homepage, and that's if a user is authenticated, or we redirect them to our login page if a user is not authenticated. We probably don't want them to just go to this random landing page that says, welcome to this FastAPI course. So what we can do here is let's go into our main.py file. And now inside here, we need to go ahead and import two things. The first thing we want to import is from FastAPI. We want to say also, let's go ahead and import status. Next, we want to go ahead and import redirect response. So we can say from FastAPI.responses import redirect response. Perfect. And now what we can do that we're going to be using this redirect response, we're no longer going to be using JWT templates in our main.py file. Now we are in all of our other files, so don't delete this everywhere. But right here, we can just go ahead and delete this FastAPI.templating. Therefore, we can remove this templates.JWT templates. Now this will cause an error. So what we can do here is we can say delete that. What we want to say is return redirect response to our URL of /todos/to-do page. With a status code that's equal to status.http 302 found. Perfect. And now if we go ahead and we rerun our application and we refresh this page, we will be redirected to this to-dos/to-dos page. And that's because I currently have a valid cookie in our applications browser. If I log out, which we know deletes all the cookies, and now I try and go to just our normal page and I click enter, we can see that it's going to redirect me to this auth login page. And that's because we don't have a valid cookie. So we're redirecting them to our render to-dos page.html. And we already know that that page only works if we have a valid cookie, because if the user is not valid, we then redirect them again to their auth login page. So what we're trying to do is redirect users that go to our empty URL to our main page, see if they have a valid user. If not, redirect them again to auth login. All right. So with that, we pretty much have our full stack application ready to go that has registration, logging in, creating to-dos, deleting to-dos, editing to-dos. We have a lot of the functionality or the CRUD operations that we need to build a full stack application using our API endpoints and Jinja templating. All right, with that, I will see you in the next video.